Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Heather and today I am here to talk about all of the books that I read in March, which are not that many, but it is more than the one that was shown in the thumbnail. March became incredibly busy, incredibly stressful for me, and I was really struggling to read this month. I'm hoping to turn that around, but I had some breakthroughs in terms of ebooks and audiobooks. They really saved my reading this month. As such, I will be looking down at my phone a lot to check Goodreads. So the first book I finished in March was Becoming Free Indeed by Ginger Volo, who you may recognize as one of the children on TLC's 19 Kids and Counting. I watched the show sometimes, although I never agreed with their version of Christianity and their interpretation of various tenets. As such, I was very intrigued by this book because Ginger goes into how she started to think similar things and figure out how she did want to live a Christian life free of all of those rules and strictures that were not, in fact, biblical. This was very simply written, and I found it really fascinating. I found her voice very clear, and so I flew through it on a snow day. It was very easy to do. I thought it was just an okay book, however, because despite all of her breakdowns of the various rules that she had followed, how it affected her mentally, emotionally as she grew, and how she is now growing as an adult, two things really got to me. The first was her descriptions of how all of these strictures that were in place gave her, to my eyes, what sounded like some sort of anxiety complex, OCD, things in that vein about if I don't do this, God is going to punish me or my family. And she says that she is so much freer now, and I'm very glad, but she said that she's still experiencing those anxious battles, and nowhere along the line did it mention seeking help for that. Additionally, towards the end, it still became very similar to the book that she references throughout this book, that she and her three older sisters wrote together, in that the end became a plea for the audience to find Jesus as well, which always makes me a bit uncomfortable. I am happy in my faith, but I am never comfortable asking someone to convert or to reaffirm their faith. I feel like that should really come from them and that it's not my place to do that. Nor did I feel like that was really the point of this book either. It just felt a bit out of place for me. Next up, I listened to the audiobook of Catch and Kill by Ronan Farrow, and this was incredible. Yes, I am late to this party as it came out several years ago and was a bestseller on and off of BookTube, and with very good reason. This is Ronan Farrow's story of how he tried to break the Harvey Weinstein scandal over several years on NBC. And not only how horrible the case was, but also how he was being followed by international grade spies, and how it was being blocked at the corporate level. It is truly frightening how much power Harvey Weinstein had over national news, international spy rings. What made this even better as an audiobook was, first of all, Ronan Farrow's voice. He has the perfect NPR type voice. It was really wonderful to listen to. But secondly, he will reference recordings a few times, especially one recording which was made for a police case that never got anywhere. And he describes what was in this recording in detail as he's talking to the woman afterwards who was involved in it. But because it's an audiobook, he is then able to include the actual recording at the end of the chapter and you hear these people's true voices. And it was so frightening, but so good. If you, like me, are late to this party and have not read that book yet, I really encourage you to do it, especially on audio. I then read another religious memoir. This was On Her Knees by Brenda Marie Davies. Brenda is here on YouTube as well on the channel God is Grey, and she promotes liberal Christianity. And I've really enjoyed some of her videos that I've watched, and I knew she wrote a book, and I found out that my library had it as an ebook. So I decided to read it as it's Lent, and I felt like it would be a good comparison or companion piece to Ginger Volo's book. I also enjoyed this. I enjoyed it a little bit more than Ginger's just because I feel like it was slightly more of an engaging read. It felt far more plot heavy, as it were. And I am slightly biased. I knew I was going to agree with Brenda's views slightly more than Ginger's views. I still don't entirely agree with either of the women, and that's what really made these books so fascinating for me. This memoir is Brenda's journey to liberal Christianity, specifically in terms of purity culture. This is her describing how the extreme purity culture that she spent her teenage years in really damaged her relationships further down the line. And that, I believe, is perfectly valid, and I could understand why she made a lot of the decisions that she did. However, some of the decisions that she made seemed completely outlandish to me, and I could not understand how she either made those decisions or how she stayed with them as long as she did. There is deeply traumatic content in here, and so while it was very moving, I still think I occupy a mid-zone between the two of them. Maybe. I'm still figuring that out. But that's exactly why I read these books. Regardless of whether or not I was going to agree with them, it's helped me reflect on my own thoughts and my own opinions. Next, I read an ARC that was sent to me digitally, and this was To the One I Love the Best by Ludwig Bemelmans. Ludwig Bemelmans is best known for writing the Madeline books for children, but they are republishing some of his adult memoir pieces. So this one describes his relationship with a woman that he knew in the 1950s in Hollywood. This woman's name was Elsie de Wolfe, and she was an extremely eccentric, larger-than-life personality. And at first I was very intrigued, especially because his writing style is beautiful. However, I didn't love any of the characters. I didn't find any of them endearing. It was really a slog to get through. Plus, the ARC at least did not contain any of his illustrations, which I think would have made it slightly better. I was expecting humorous anecdotes about their time together, and it just didn't hit that note for me. It was very hard to follow at times. Any guests at parties who showed up as a one-off seemed very one-dimensional, and the casual racial slurs that were just slung about everywhere were really disconcerting. I realize it was the 50s and people were not as politically correct, but there seemed to be a real note of at least extreme dislike, if not hatred, and that just didn't sit well with me. And then finally, I read Sister Novelists by Devaney Loser. I finally finished it. I have been buddy reading this with Megan of Megan the Story Girl, and I finished it just in time to watch an interview with Loser at the New York Public Library. Not in person, it was streamed on their website and their YouTube channel. This was really interesting. I did end up having to switch to the audiobook because I just couldn't focus on the physical page. And ultimately that really helped. It really brought Anna Maria and Jane Porter's voices to life, which is really what this book was trying to do. They were two sisters and novelists writing in the earlier part of the 1800s, so overlapping with Jane Austen and Sir Walter Scott. They were bestsellers in their time, and yet their works have not had the lasting popularity. And this book really investigates why. It also goes into their personal lives, their family life, their love lives. And there were so many salient points in here that I found really, really interesting. I don't know that I'm ever going to be tempted to read any of their works. They just don't really appeal to me. Sir Walter Scott's do appeal to me more, which I realize is heresy after having read this. But I think they were fascinating women in their own right, and it highlights a lot of things like the trivialization of women's writing, especially romance and historical fiction, and especially historical fiction romance, and how that has been going on for hundreds and hundreds of years, and that it's high time that we did something to try and reverse it. And it even looks at the pay gap and systemic misogyny. It's really fascinating, and I'm glad that I read it. So those are the books that I read in March. I'm hopeful that April will be a better reading month for me. I've already finished one book, and I hope to keep that trend going and get back on my usual track. Let me know down below what you read in March, or if you have any questions or comments about the things that I read. Until next time, be safe, be well, and happy reading. Bye everyone.